The unfamiliar howl hung in the twilight air like a poison, its echo vibrating in Lyra's bones long after the sound faded. It wasn't just a sound, it was a memory given voice, and through the bond, she felt Caius's instant, visceral recognition. A recognition that carried 70 years of hatred and dread. She ran, branches whipping at her face, following the silver thread of the bond that pulled her toward the western tree line. The forest here was different from the Whispering Wood, younger, less twisted, but just as watchful. She could hear the pack gathering ahead, the sounds of hurried movement, low growls, the sharp snaps of shifting forms. She burst into a clearing at the edge of Frosthaven territory. The pack was arrayed in a defensive semicircle, most in wolf form, a wall of gray, brown, and black fur, teeth bared. At their head stood Caius in human form, a rifle in his hands that looked both modern and ritualistically carved. Beside him, Caius stood fully shifted, the massive silver-tipped wolf she'd first seen on the mountain. He was larger than any other, his shoulders bunched with tension, a continuous, sub-audible growl rumbling from his chest that Lyra felt in her teeth. Before them, at the tree line of the neighboring territory, stood 3 figures. The one in front was a man. He leaned against a twisted oak as if he owned the forest, a picture of casual menace. He was tall, almost Caius's height, but lean where Caius was broad. His hair was the color of rust and fell to his shoulders. He wore patched leathers and furs that had seen hard travel. His face was handsome in a sharp, cunning way, etched with lines that spoke of laughter as much as cruelty. But his eyes, they were the pale, cold yellow of winter sun on ice. An alpha's eyes, but without the molten fire of Caius's. These were calculating, amused, and utterly cold. This was the source of the howl, the exiled one. Flanking him were 2 others, a hulking man with a shaved head and arms thick with tribal tattoos, and a sharp-faced woman with eyes that missed nothing, a bow held loosely in her hands. Their postures spoke of relaxed readiness, of predators who knew they had the advantage of surprise. Roran. Caius's voice emerged from the wolf, a graveled, guttural sound that was more thought than speech, projected to all present. You were told never to cross the black water. The sentence was exile, not a revolving door. The man, Roran, pushed off from the tree, his smile widening. It didn't reach his cold eyes. Caius, still holding court in your stone castle, I see, still nursing that ancient guilt. It's grown stale, brother. The forest whispers of new things. His gaze, those pale yellow eyes, slid past the wall of wolves, past Caius, and landed unerringly on Lyra, who had stopped at the edge of the clearing. His smile turned into something predatory and knowing. Ah, Roran breathed, the sound carrying. The whispers were true, a human, and not just any human. He took a deep, theatrical sniff of the air. You smell of him, and of old magic. The Crimson Sickle's little joke bonded to your soul. How deliciously tragic. A ripple of unease went through the Frosthaven pack. Lyra felt it through her connection to them, a secondary pulse through her bond with Caius. They knew about the bond, but having it announced by an enemy like this was different. It was a vulnerability exposed. Caius shifted. It was not the graceful, fluid change she'd seen before. It was a violent, sudden transformation, bones cracking and reforming in a spray of silver light, as if his rage could not be contained in wolf form. He stood as a man, naked from the shift, blood from half-healed wounds smeared across his chest. He didn't seem to notice. His golden eyes burned with a fury that made the air taste like ozone. You speak of things you cannot comprehend, exile, Caius snarled. Your trespass is death. Your knowledge of my pack's affairs is death. Choose which claim you wish to settle first. Roran chuckled, unfazed. Still all thunder and no lightning, I see. I'm not here to challenge your territory, old friend. Not directly. His cold eyes locked on Lyra again. I'm here for the anomaly. The human with the alpha's bond. She's a fascinating precedent. My new associates are very, very interested in how such a thing is possible. Kalen stepped forward, his rifle coming up. You have 3 seconds to turn around and start running back across the black water. The tattooed man beside Roran growled, a deep animal sound. The woman with the bow knocked an arrow with practiced ease. The air tightened, a bowstring about to snap. Think, Caius, Roran said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone that somehow carried. This bond is a weakness, a crack in your armor. I can smell the conflict in you from here. You want it gone. I have resources now, people who understand the old magics better than your tired healer. I could take this problem off your hands, cleanly, no risky rituals. Just give her to me, and I'll vanish from your borders for another 70 years. You can go back to mourning in peace. The offer hung in the clearing, a toxic cloud. Lyra's blood ran cold. She felt the reaction in the pack, not agreement, but a tense consideration. She was a complication, a risk. And here was a way to be rid of the risk, offered by the devil they knew. Caius didn't even look at her. His stare was fixed on Roran, but Lyra felt the turmoil inside him through the bond. The old instinct to protect his pack, to remove threats. The desperate desire to be free of the bond that had stirred up his past. Roran's offer was a dark mirror of Morwenna's in the glen, a seemingly easy solution with a terrible price. She is not a commodity to be traded, Caius said, his voice dangerously low. She is under my protection. Protection? Roran laughed. Or ownership? Does she get a say in this? He called out directly to Lyra now, his voice slick and persuasive. Little human, do you wish to be protected by the male whose bond is a death sentence? Who plans to carve it out of you under the full moon with a ritual that might leave you a mindless husk? Come with me. The people I serve have gentler methods. They value unique specimens. Lyra felt every pair of eyes turn to her. The pack's, wary. Roran's, calculating. Caius's. She couldn't see his face, but through the bond she felt a spike of something that wasn't just anger. It was fear. Fear that she might say yes. She stepped forward into the clearing proper. Her legs trembled, but her voice did not. I've already met one of your people, I think, a witch in the glen. She offered me a deal too. I'm starting to think you all have the same sales pitch. Give up what makes me, me, for the promise of safety. It's a bad trade. Roran's amused facade slipped for a second, replaced by genuine surprise, then sharp interest. You spoke to Morwenna, and you're still sane? More interesting by the moment. He recovered, his smile returning. But you mistake me. This isn't a sales pitch. It's the prelude to a collection. He nodded to the woman with the bow. The arrow was loosed not at Caius or Kalen, but in a high, arcing shot over the pack's heads. It landed in the soil at Lyra's feet with a soft thump. Not a normal arrow. The shaft was wrapped in dried herbs and tiny carved bones. It began to smoke, releasing a thin, acrid plume that smelled of sage, grave dirt, and something metallic. Marked, Roran said simply. The effect was instant. The bond in Lyra's core, usually a steady hum or a pulling thread, suddenly twisted. It felt like a fishhook had been set in the connection itself and given a sharp yank. She cried out, stumbling to her knees. The world tilted, the clearing, the wolves, Caius, all of it blurred, replaced by a sudden, overwhelming sense of pull toward Roran. It wasn't attraction. It was a magical compulsion, a counter-magnetism trying to override her bond to Caius. Caius roared in pain and fury. The hook was in his end of the bond, too. He clutched his chest, silver light flaring erratically around him. An anchor arrow! Kalen snarled, leveling his rifle. You bastard! The bond is a tether, Roran said, his voice bright with triumph. And now I've tied a second line to your little human. My associates will use it to reel her in, right through your defenses. You can try to hold on, Caius, but pulling against us will tear her apart in the process. Your choice. Let her go, or kill her yourself. Chaos erupted. Kalen fired. The tattooed man surged forward, taking the shot on a shield that shimmered to life on his arm. More magic. The Frosthaven pack charged with a symphony of snarls, but Lyra was drowning. The conflicting pulls were agony, a spiritual rack. She could feel Caius's will on one end, fierce and possessive, holding onto their connection with brute force, and on the other end, a cold, insistent, alien magic, pulling with mechanical relentlessness. The bond felt like it was stretching, thinning, about to snap. Through the pain, she saw Caius fighting his way toward her, cutting down one of Roran's companions, the tattooed man, with a swipe of claws that gleamed like steel. But Roran and the archer were fading back into the trees, the arrow's smoke creating a hazy barrier that disoriented the wolves. "Until the full moon, brother," Roran's voice called from the deepening shadows. "We'll be waiting, and we'll take what's been so interestingly marked." Caius reached her, his hands gripping her shoulders. His touch was an anchor in the maelstrom. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice cutting through the psychic noise. "The bond is yours. It is part of you. They cannot take what you do not give. Reject their line. Find our connection and hold it." His words were a lifeline. The bond was hers, not just his. She had fed it her strength. She had used it as a compass. She had felt Anya's love through it. It was woven into her now. She focused inward, past the pain, past the alien pull. She found the core of the bond, not the stretched, tortured feeling, but the original connection. The one that felt like his stormy presence, his grudging respect, the startling warmth of his touch by the frozen lake. She wrapped her own will around it, not with force, but with certainty. "This is mine." The alien pull lessened, just a fraction. The hook was still there, but she was no longer a passive fish. She was a rooted tree. The smoky magic from the arrow began to dissipate. The immediate crisis passed, but the damage was done. The hook was set. The threat was clear. Panting, Lyra looked up at Caius. His face was inches from hers, his golden eyes wild with fear and fury. For the first time, the fear was for her, not of her. "They've anchored a tracking spell in the bond," he gritted out. "Until we remove it, they can find you anywhere. And on the full moon, when the bond is at its peak, they'll use that anchor to try to rip you from me." The pack gathered around them, some wounded, all tense. The bodies of the fallen were being dragged away by Roran's retreating forces. It had been a probe, a declaration, and it had succeeded. Kalen approached, his expression grim. "He's aligned with someone powerful. That shield magic wasn't Pack, and the anchor arrow, that's old coven work." Caius helped Lyra to her feet, his hand lingering on her arm. The bond still throbbed with the echo of the violation, but his touch was steadying. "The full moon is tomorrow night," he said, his voice hollow. "The unbinding ritual, or a battle." He looked from Lyra to his pack, to the woods where his enemy had vanished. The exiled one had returned, not for territory, but for the very thing that complicated Caius's life. The bond was no longer just a personal tragedy. It was a strategic target, and Lyra was the ground on which the war would be fought. The return to Frosthaven was a funeral procession without a body. The pack moved in grim silence, the adrenaline of the brief skirmish hardening into cold dread. Roran's words hung in the air like the acrid smoke from the anchor arrow, which Kalen had carefully wrapped in a cloth and carried like a toxic specimen. The hook in Lyra's bond was a constant, low-grade nausea, a wrongness that made her feel perpetually off balance. Caius walked beside her, not touching her, but his presence was a solid wall against the frightened and suspicious glances from some pack members. The bond hummed with his fury, but beneath it, a new, more terrifying current ran, a profound, calculating fear. The Alpha was not just angry, he was strategizing against a threat that had found the one chink in his armor. They gathered in the manor's great hall, a cavernous room with a massive stone fireplace. The wounded were seen to by Selene and her assistants. The air was thick with the scent of blood, pine, and anxiety. Kalen laid the wrapped arrow on the heavy oak table. "It's definitely coven work. The binding is woven with blood magic and something else. Something metallic and old. It's not just a tracker. It's a siphon. The more she uses the bond, the stronger their pull becomes. All eyes turned to Lyra. She stood near the fire, feeling like a specimen under glass. A young, dark-haired female shifter named Nyla, who had brought her blankets days before, offered a slight, encouraging nod. But others, like a broad-shouldered male named Torvin, glared with open hostility. "She's made us a target," Torvin growled, his voice echoing in the hall. "Roran wouldn't dare cross the Blackwater for a direct fight, but this gives him a weapon that strikes at our Alpha's core. She's a liability." Before Lyra could even flinch, Caius's voice cut through the room, cold and final. "She is a member of this pack by bond, and under my protection. The next person who calls her a liability will answer to me. Is that understood?" The authority in his voice was absolute, a physical pressure that made even Torvin drop his gaze. But the resentment didn't disappear, it just sank beneath the surface. "The question," Celine said, her practical voice a calm contrast, "is not about blame, but about solution. The anchor is embedded in the bond itself. We cannot remove it without touching the bond. The unbinding ritual tomorrow night would sever it completely, anchor and all. Or kill her in the process," Kaelin added quietly. The ritual was risky before. With this foreign magic tangled in the bond's roots, it could react unpredictably. It might not sever cleanly. It might backlash. Caius paced before the fireplace, a caged predator. "Roran's coven will be waiting for the full moon. They'll expect the ritual, or they'll expect us to be distracted by it. They'll use the anchor to pull her to them." He stopped, his golden eyes finding Lyra. "They don't just want to study you. They want to replicate the bond, to create a weapon, an alpha bound to a controllable human puppet." The horrifying scope of it dawned on Lyra. She wasn't just an anomaly, she was a blueprint. "So we fight," said Nyla, stepping forward. Her voice was softer than Torvin's, but held a steely resolve. "We protect our own. We've faced threats before." "Not like this," Caius said. "We are wolves. This is magic. Their kind operates from shadows and symbols. They will not meet us on an open field." He looked at the wrapped arrow. "They have already struck from the shadows." Lyra finally found her voice. "What if we use it?" All heads turned to her. She swallowed, pushing down the fear. "The anchor. It's a connection going both ways, right? They can pull on me. Can I pull on them? Can we feel where they are?" A slow, dangerous light kindled in Kaelin's storm-gray eyes. "A reverse trace. If we could amplify the bond locally, feed energy into it, we might be able to sense the other end of the tether. Find their nest." He looked at Caius. "It's a risk. It would mean strengthening the bond temporarily, making you both more vulnerable to their pull." Caius stared at Lyra. The bond between them was a taut wire. The easy solution, the pack-safe solution, was to proceed with the unbinding and hope she survived. The risky, aggressive solution was to lean into the very connection that terrified him, to use it as a weapon. "Show me," he said to Kaelin, his decision made. "Show me how to amplify it." The sanctum below the manor felt different this time. The obsidian scrying disk, which had shown them the depth of their connection, now represented a potential battlefield. Celine and Kaelin worked together, placing polished stones at points around the disk's silver runes. Moonstone, clear quartz, a shard of lodestone. "You must both stand in the center," Celine instructed. "The amplification will heighten everything, your connection, your senses, and the anchor's pull. You must not fight the alien pull. You must observe it, trace its flavor, its direction. Like tasting poison to identify the source." Lyra stepped onto the cold obsidian. Caius followed. The moment they both stood within the runic circle, the familiar amplification jolt hit, but it was sharper, more intense. The hum became a resonant chord that vibrated in her teeth. The anchor's hook in her core burned, a point of cold fire. "Focus on the bond," Kaelin said from the edge of the disk, his voice seeming to come from far away. "Not on each other, on the space between you, the tether itself. Lyra closed her eyes. She felt Caius doing the same beside her. She reached for the bond, not as a feeling, but as a structure in her mind's eye. She saw it again, the braided cord of light and shadow. But now she saw the foreign element, a thin, sickly green strand, barbed like a fishhook, woven around a section of the braid. It pulsed with a rhythm that was alien, mechanical. "Do you see it?" Caius's voice was in her mind, a clear, focused thought. "Yes, it's cold. Follow the cold." She let her awareness travel down the green strand, away from the warm, turbulent energy of their shared bond. It led out of her, out of the sanctum, into the dark. The feeling was like being dragged by a current through freezing water. North, west, toward the deepest part of the mountains, beyond the Blackwater River. Images flashed, distorted and sharp, a cavern mouth hidden behind a waterfall of black ice, the smell of wet stone, burning herbs, and copper. Figures in dark robes moving around a stone altar that shimmered with the same green energy. A woman with hair the color of flame and eyes like chips of flint, looking up as if she felt their gaze. Lyra gasped, the connection snapping back like a rubber band. She stumbled, and Caius's hand shot out to steady her, his grip firm. The physical contact sent a fresh surge through the amplified bond, a feedback loop of shared vision and shock. "They're in the old ice caves," Caius said aloud, his voice rough. "The glacier's throat. It's a dead zone for pack magic. No wonder we couldn't scent them." "And the woman?" Kaelin asked. "The coven leader," Caius said, his jaw tight. "Valeria. I thought she was a myth, a story used to frighten young wolves." "She's real," Lyra panted, the cold, flinty eyes still etched in her mind. "And she was waiting for us to look." As the amplification faded, the anchor's pull remained, now feeling more like a taut line with a known location at the other end. The good news, they knew where the enemy was. The bad news, the enemy now knew they were looking. Celine's face was pale. "You've alerted them. They will accelerate their plans." Caius still hadn't released Lyra's arm. His touch was no longer just steadying, it was possessive. The amplification had done more than show them the enemy. It had forced a moment of pure, unfiltered connection. There had been no room for his walls or her fear. There had only been the mission and their minds moving as one. He slowly let go, the absence of his touch feeling as significant as the touch itself. "We have until the moon reaches its zenith tomorrow night," Caius said, addressing the room. "They will strike then, when the bond is strongest and the ritual would traditionally begin. We have two objectives: defend Frosthaven and sever the anchor." He looked at Lyra, his gaze inscrutable. "The unbinding ritual is off the table. The risk is too great. We find another way to cut their line." "And if we can't?" Torvin asked, though with less hostility than before. "Then we cut them," Caius said, his golden eyes glinting in the low light. "Every last one. We burn their coven out of the glacier's throat. But to do that, we need to draw them out. We need bait they can't resist." A heavy silence fell. Every person in the room understood. Lyra was the bait. The great hall emptied, leaving only the crackle of the fire and the weight of the unspoken plan. Caius remained by the hearth, his profile etched in flame and shadow. Lyra stood a few feet away, the phantom pull of the anchor a constant reminder in her gut. "You don't have to do this," he said, not looking at her. "The role of bait. We can find another way." "Is there one?" Lyra asked, her voice quiet in the vast room. "You said it yourself. They operate from shadows. They won't come out unless they're sure they can get what they want. And they want me." He turned then, his golden eyes capturing hers. The bond between them thrummed with a chaotic mix of his resolve and a deep, reluctant protectiveness. "I will have the pack surrounding you. Kaelin will be your shadow. But once the ritual space is activated, once we make it seem like we're proceeding with the unbinding to draw their magic out, the anchor will pull hard. You will be vulnerable. You will feel like you are being torn in two. I've felt that before, she said, thinking of the glen, of the conflicting pulls of past and present. What's the alternative? Run? They'd find me. Or let you try the unbinding and risk a magical backlash that might kill me or worse. This is the only play, Caius. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He didn't touch her, but his presence was overwhelming, a wall of heat and tension. This is not your fight. You were dragged into this world because of a celestial accident. You should not have to stand as a shield for my pack. Anger, sharp and sudden, flared in her chest. Stop deciding what I should or shouldn't do. This stopped being just your fight the moment that wolf on the mountain looked at me. The moment I poured my strength into you. The moment I felt Anya's love through our bond. I'm in it. However I got here, I'm in it. And I'm not just a piece on your board. I'm the one who has to live in this skin, with this thing in my soul. So if I have to be bait to cut it out, then that's my choice. He stared at her, his expression shifting from alpha command to something more raw. Her defiance didn't anger him. It seemed to disarm him. You are infuriating, he said, but the words held no heat. So I've been told. A ghost of that almost smile touched his lips, vanishing as quickly as it came. The plan is dangerous. Valeria is not like Morwenna. She is not a solitary witch nursing a grudge. She is the head of a coven that has survived by being smarter and more ruthless than the shifters they prey upon. She wants the bond's secret. She will not just pull, she will try to transfer it. Transfer it? To one of her own. Sever it from you and graft it to a vessel of her choosing. The process would likely destroy your mind in the extraction. His hand lifted, almost of its own volition, and his fingertips brushed the line of her jaw. The touch was electric, a stark contrast to the grim words. I cannot allow that. Lyra leaned into the touch just for a second. The bond sang with the contact, the anchor cold hook momentarily overshadowed by the warmth of his skin. Then we make sure your plan works. The next day was a whirlwind of grim preparation. Frosthaven transformed from a secluded sanctuary into a fortress. Celine and her assistants worked on wards, painting intricate silvery runes on the manor's stones and the trees at the clearing's edge. The air buzzed with suppressed magic. Kaelin took Lyra to the armory, a room she hadn't known existed, lined with weapons both ancient and modern. He didn't offer her a blade. Instead, he gave her a small, sheathed dagger made of a dull gray metal. Cold iron, he explained. Spell slip. It won't kill a witch, but a cut from it will disrupt their concentration, break a casting. It's a last resort. Your primary job is to stay within the warded circle and focus on resisting the pull. Let Caius and the pack handle the rest. He also handed her a thin braided cord of leather and silver. Wear this. It's woven with hairs from every pack member. It won't stop the anchor, but it will remind the coven that you're not alone. You are surrounded by a pack's will. Lyra tied it around her wrist. It felt warm. In the afternoon, she found herself in the sunroom, staring out at the gathering dusk. The full moon would rise soon, a perfect round coin of white light, not the sickled crimson of her arrival, but potent in its own way. Nyla entered, carrying 2 mugs of steaming tea. She handed one to Lyra. He's pacing in the war room like a tornado trapped in a bottle, she said, nodding toward the interior of the house. He's never fought a battle with his bonded on the field before. It's unraveling him. He seems controlled, Lyra said, taking the tea. Control is his language, but the bond speaks a more visceral tongue. We all feel it. The pack's connection to him is frayed with his anxiety. It's why Torvin was an ass. Fear makes wolves snap. Nyla sipped her tea. He won't fail you, you know. However this ends, he will make sure you are not taken. I know, Lyra said, and she realized she did know. However terrified she was, she didn't doubt his commitment to her survival. The realization was a quiet anchor of its own. As twilight deepened, Celine came for her. The healer had changed into a simple robe of deep blue. "It is time, child, to the stone circle." The clearing behind Frosthaven was larger than Lyra had realized. At its center stood a ring of 9 ancient standing stones, moss-covered and imposing. Within the ring, the ground was bare earth, etched with patterns that mirrored the runes on the obsidian disk. Torches flickered at intervals, but the main light would be the moon. The pack gathered in a wide perimeter outside the stones, a silent ring of watchful wolves and armed humans. Kalen took up a position just outside the easternmost stone, his rifle slung, a long knife in his hand. His storm-gray eyes met Lyra's, and he gave a single, reassuring nod. Caius waited for her in the very center of the circle. He wore only loose, dark pants, his torso bare to the night air. The fresh scars from the glen were visible, but so was the powerful musculature of a warrior ready for battle. In his hands, he held the cloth-wrapped tear of the moon. "The plan is simple," he said, his voice low, for her alone. "We will begin the motions of the unbinding ritual. We will use the tear, our blood, the moon's light. We will make the bond flare brightly like a beacon. That is when Valeria will strike. She will try to use the anchor to hijack the ritual, to pull the bond to her location. The moment her magic fully engages with the anchor, Celine's wards will activate, trapping her magical signature here. It will give us a clear shot at her consciousness, a pathway to strike back, and the pack will move to intercept any physical attackers. What do I do? You stand with me. You hold on to our bond with everything you are. You do not let go, no matter what they show you, no matter what they promise. You hold on to me." His gaze was fierce, unwavering. "Do you understand?" "Yes." He unwrapped the tear. The silver flower glowed softly in the gathering dark. He used the tip of his claw to slice a thin line across his palm, letting a few drops of blood fall onto the petals. They absorbed it, the silver light taking on a faint pinkish hue. "Your hand," he said. Lyra offered her palm. His touch was gentle as he made a small, precise cut. Her blood joined his on the flower. The moment their blood mingled on the tear, the bond between them ignited. It was like stepping into a current of pure energy. The world narrowed to the circle, to him, to the throbbing cord of light and shadow that connected her core to his. The anchor's hook burned with a sudden, vicious cold, a stark counterpoint. Caius raised the glowing flower above his head, and as the first sliver of the full moon cleared the eastern trees, he began to chant in a low, guttural language that was older than words. The runes on the ground began to glow with a matching silver light. The ritual had begun. For a few moments, there was only the thrum of power, the pull of the moon, the profound intimacy of standing with him in a circle of ancient magic, their blood and souls entwined. Then, the anchor woke up. It was a yank that stole her breath. The cold, green magic didn't just pull, it invaded. It slithered down the bond, carrying with it whispers that were not sound, but direct impressions in her mind. "Release. Come to us. We will make the pain stop. We will set you free. He will never love you like he loved her. You are a tool, a temporary fix. See? See how he holds the knife that will cut you away?" Images flashed. Caius, his face cold, turning the bloodied tear into a blade. Caius walking away, Anya's ghost on his arm, herself empty and discarded. Lyra. Caius's voice was a bedrock in the psychic storm. His hand found hers, their blood-slick palms pressing together. The physical connection amplified their bond, a warm, roaring flame against the invasive cold. "Look at me, only me." She locked onto his golden eyes, the one constant in the swirling madness. She held on to the feel of his hand, the sound of his voice, the memory of his touch by the frozen lake. The coven's attack intensified. The green magic wasn't just whispering now, it was digging, trying to pry her fingers from the bond. The pain was excruciating, a spiritual dissection. Outside the stones, the pack stirred. A howl went up, not from them, but from the tree line. Dark, lupine shapes emerged, but these wolves moved with a jerky, unnatural coordination. Roran's allies, twisted by coven magic. The battle for Frosthaven had begun with a chorus of snarls and the clash of bodies, but the true battle was inside the circle. Caius's chant grew louder, more forceful. The tear in his hand blazed like a star. Lyra felt him doing as Kaelin had theorized. He was feeding power into the bond, making it shine brighter, making it a more tempting target. He was letting the anchor's hook set deep. "Now, Selene!" he roared. From the perimeter, Selene raised her arms. The ward runes etched on the stones and ground erupted in a network of brilliant silver light, forming a cage of pure magic. The invading green energy, now fully engaged in trying to steal the bond, was suddenly trapped within that cage, its pathway back to the coven cut off and illuminated. In Lyra's mind's eye, she saw it clearly, a taut, glowing green line stretching from her, through the ward net and into the darkness, vibrating with trapped energy. The pathway Kaelin had hoped for. Caius dropped the tear. It fell to the earth, its light undimmed. He placed both his hands on Lyra's shoulders, his eyes holding hers with terrifying intensity. "The line is trapped. I can strike along it, but I need you. I need our bond as the conduit. It will hurt. It will feel like you are burning from the inside out. Do you trust me?" Around them, the sounds of battle raged. Wolves fought twisted monsters. Kaelin fired shot after shot into the shadows. But in the center of the storm, there was only his question. Lyra, her body trembling with strain, her mind fraying at the edges, looked into the eyes of the wounded Alpha who had been her jailer, her protector, and now her only lifeline. "Yes," she gasped. He nodded, and then his consciousness surged down the bond, not as a thought, but as a weapon. A concentrated blast of pure alpha will, amplified by the ritual's energy and focused by the trapped pathway. It wasn't pain, it was annihilation. Lyra screamed as their combined power, his fierce, disciplined rage and her raw, desperate will, traveled back along the anchored line like lightning following a rod. It wasn't a physical attack, it was a spiritual counter-invasion. For a split second, she was no longer in the stone circle. She was in the ice cavern. She saw Valeria, the flame-haired witch, eyes wide with shock as her own magic backlashed, the conduit she had opened now flooding with a power she could not control. Lyra felt Caius's will, sharp and deadly as a blade, strike at the coven leader's mind. A psychic shriek echoed through the connection, then was abruptly cut off. The anchor in Lyra's core didn't just go quiet. It shattered. The release was so sudden she collapsed, Caius catching her before she hit the ground. The invasive cold was gone. The bond remained, thrumming, alive, but clean of the foreign magic. The pull had ceased. Around them, the twisted wolves attacking the pack let out unified howls of agony and confusion, then broke, melting back into the forest as if their strings had been cut. Silence descended, broken only by the panting of the pack and the crackle of the torches. Lyra looked up at Caius. He was breathing heavily, sweat mingling with the blood on his chest. His eyes searched her face, his hands gripping her arms. "Are you whole?" he asked, his voice ragged. She nodded, unable to speak. The bond between them felt different, lighter, clean, but also more present, more accepted. The immediate threat was over. The anchor was broken. Valeria, if not dead, had been dealt a severe blow. Roran had fled once more. But as Caius helped her to her feet and the pack began to tend to their wounded, Lyra saw the look in his eyes. It wasn't triumph. It was a grim realization. They had won the battle by wielding the bond as a weapon. They had chosen, in the crucible of conflict, to strengthen it, not sever it. The unbinding ritual was in ashes at their feet. The tear of the moon lay glowing innocently on the ground, and the full moon shone down on them, not as a judge, but as a witness to the fact that the bond was no longer a mistake to be corrected. It was a treaty, signed in blood and battle. and neither of them knew what that meant for the war still to come. The silence after battle was a living thing, thick with the scent of torn earth, iron, and spent magic. The stone circle, moments ago a crucible of power, now felt like a sacred, scarred space. Lyra leaned against Caius, her legs unsteady, the phantom ache of the shattered anchor still echoing in her nerves. His arm around her waist was the only solid thing in a world that seemed to tilt. Celine was the first to breach the circle, her healer's senses reaching out before her hands did. She checked Lyra's pupils, pressed fingers to the pulse in her neck, then did the same to Caius. The foreign magic is gone, scorched clean. But the backlash, you've both taken a psychic shock. Her wise eyes held a mixture of relief and deep concern. The bond is intact, stronger if anything. It has been battle-tested. The pack gathered at the edge of the stones. Some bore fresh wounds, claw marks, bites from the twisted wolves. But their eyes were not on their own injuries. They were on the center of the circle, on their alpha holding the human, on the glowing tear discarded on the ground. Torvin stepped forward, his earlier hostility replaced by a gruff, assessing respect. He gave a sharp nod, not to Caius, but to Lyra. You held the line. You didn't break. It wasn't warmth, but it was acknowledgement. It was pack recognition. Nyla helped a younger shifter bind a wound, her smile for Lyra small but bright. Kalen approached, wiping his knife clean. His storm-gray eyes were tired, but alert. Roran and his surviving forces retreated across the black water. The twisted ones collapsed when the anchor shattered. They were puppets. The strings are cut. He glanced at the tear. The coven's link is severed, but Valeria is not dead. Wounded, furious, and now personally invested, she felt Caius's mind strike hers. She won't forget that. Caius finally released Lyra, though his hand lingered on her back, as if to ensure she was steady. He straightened, the alpha mantle settling back onto his shoulders, but it looked different now. The grief that had been its core foundation had been cracked open, and something else, something fiercer and more present, was visible in the fissures. Secure the perimeter, double the watches. The threat is not over, it is wounded. A wounded enemy is often more dangerous. His commands were crisp, but his voice was hoarse. Celine, see to the wounded. Everyone else get some rest. We meet at dawn. The pack dispersed, moving with the efficiency of those accustomed to violence and its aftermath. Lyra watched them go, feeling the strange new weight of their acceptance. She wasn't one of them, not truly, but she was no longer an outsider. She was the alpha's bonded, who had stood in the fire with him. Caius bent and picked up the tear of the moon. It still glowed softly in his palm, a beautiful, tragic thing. He looked from it to Lyra. This was meant to be a key to a lock. Now it is just a flower again. He closed his hand around it, the light peeking through his fingers. Come with me. He didn't lead her back to the manor. Instead, he walked to the edge of the clearing, to the frozen lake he had shown her. The moon reflected perfectly on its black ice, a twin of the one in the sky. He sat on a broad, flat rock at the water's edge and gestured for her to join him. The silence here was different, natural, clean of magic and blood. For a long time they just sat, watching the moon, their breath pluming in the air. The bond hummed quietly between them, a settled, resilient thing. The constant pull was gone. All that remained was the connection itself and the echoes of what they had just done. I could not have broken that anchor without you, he said, his voice quiet in the vast quiet. My will alone would have been a blunt instrument. It would have shattered the bond trying to sever their hook. But your will, it was precise. It was the conduit. You directed the strike. I just held on, Lyra said, staring at the moon's reflection. I held on to you. That, he said, turning to look at her, is the part I did not understand. I thought the bond was a vulnerability because it gave an enemy a point of leverage, a hook to sink in. I did not consider it could also be a hilt, a place to grip a weapon. He opened his hand, looking at the tear. I spent 70 years believing love was the flaw that got Anya killed. Tonight, I used a different kind of love, a fledgling, stubborn, unwanted thing, as a weapon to protect what is mine. The logic of my world is breaking. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. What are you saying? I am saying, he said, his golden eyes capturing hers, that the unbinding ritual is no longer an option. The bond is part of Frosthaven's defenses now, part of my strength, and part of yours. He looked away, back at the lake. This does not mean what you think it might mean. It does not mean happy endings or fated bliss. It means you are a strategic asset. It means you are a target. It means your life is irrevocably tied to a war that has been simmering for generations. I am offering you not a romance, Lyra. I am offering you a posting on the front lines. The raw honesty of it was more staggering than any declaration of love could have been. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't weaving a fairy tale. He was a general assessing a soldier, and he was telling her the truth of the battlefield. What happens now? She asked. Now, he said, standing. You learn. You learn to shield not just your mind, but your energy. You learn to fight, not with claws, but with the bond. You learn what it means to be part of a pack, even in a human skin. And he paused, a shadow of the old torment crossing his face. I learn how to lead with a bonded mate at my side instead of a ghost in my heart. He offered her his hand, not to help her up, but as a pact. Lyra looked at his hand, scarred and powerful. She thought of her dead car, her empty apartment, the life that had felt like a waiting room. She thought of the terror of the glen, the wrenching agony of the anchor, the blinding unity of their counterstrike. She thought of the pack's grudging respect, of Nyla's kindness, of Celine's care. She thought of the wounded, magnificent man before her who had just offered her a place in his war, honestly and without pretty lies. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and sure. I guess graphic design skills aren't much use on the front lines, she said. For the first time, a real, true smile touched his lips, transforming his harsh face into something breathtaking. We'll find a use for them, perhaps for designing very intimidating warning signs for our borders. A howl pierced the night, not from their perimeter, but from deep within the forest to the north. It was long, mournful, and carried on the wind. It was not a threat. It was a lament. Caius's smile vanished, his head snapping toward the sound. His grip on her hand tightened. The dirge howl, he whispered. That's from the Northern Sentinel. They only sound it for one thing. Lyra felt a chill that had nothing to do with the frozen lake. For what? A death in the bloodline. His eyes met hers, golden and grim. The Winterfang pack, my mother's people. They have been silent neighbors for decades. If their alpha is dead. He looked north, his mind already racing through implications, alliances, and new threats. The balance of power in these mountains just shifted. Roran and Valeria won't be the only ones who see opportunity in chaos. The moment of respite was over. The personal battle for the bond had converged with the political war for territory. Lyra's new life on the front lines had just gotten exponentially more complicated. Caius released her hand, his body already thrumming with the need to act, to plan, to protect. But before he turned to go, he leaned in, his voice for her alone. Welcome to the pack, Lyra Bishop. Your first diplomatic crisis begins at dawn. He strode away toward the manor, already calling for Kaelin, his voice once more the voice of command. Lyra stood by the frozen lake, the moon gleaming on the ice, the dirge howl still echoing in the bones of the mountains. She was no longer a prisoner, a patient, or a problem. She was the Alpha's bonded, the pack's asset, the frontline soldier, and the front line had just expanded to encompass the entire snowy, wolf-ruled range of mountains known as the Frostholds. The real war was just beginning. End of episode 3. What choice would you have made? Faced with Caius's stark offer, a life on the supernatural front lines, bound to a wounded alpha and his pack's wars. Would you have taken his hand? Let me know in the comments. Team bond or team break? Your reactions shape the story's journey. The stakes are higher than ever. The bond is sealed, but the cost is a lifetime of conflict. With a rival coven wounded and vengeful, an exiled brother lurking in the shadows, and now a neighboring pack thrown into chaos by the death of its alpha, Frosthaven is surrounded by threats. Next time on Under the Crimson Moon, Lyra must navigate her new role as the first human bonded to an alpha, but her first test comes not from claws, but from politics. Caius is forced to travel to the Winterfang Pack's territory to pay respects and secure a shaky alliance, taking Lyra into the heart of a grieving, hostile pack that views her as an abomination. Amidst new enemies and fragile diplomacy, the bond will face its greatest challenge yet: tradition. And from the shadows, Valeria begins a new ritual, one that doesn't require stealing a bond, but replicating it, using a source of Lyra's blood left behind in the snow. Don't miss Episode 4, Bloodline Dirge. Subscribe and hit the bell to join the pack and never miss an episode. Like this video if you're ready for Lyra to step into her power. Comment below. What should Lyra's first lesson as official pack member be? Combat training, political strategy, or mastering the bond as a weapon? The howl has sounded. The game has changed. See you in the next episode.